Well, good morning. It's Grandpa Ricky, and it's beautiful here. There's so much life and green and new things and tips on the redwoods. And I'm going to read some more of No Mud, No Lotus by Thich Nhat Hanh. This is number 3. And the heading today is The Pull of Distractions. When we stop the busyness of the mind and come back to ourselves, the enormity and rawness of our suffering can seem very intense because we are so used to ignoring it and distracting ourselves. When we feel suffering, we have the urge to run away from it and fill ourselves with junk food, junk entertainment, and anything to keep our mind off the pain that is there inside us. But it doesn't work. We may succeed in numbing ourselves from it for a little while, but the suffering inside wants our attention, and it will fester and churn away until it gets it. We run away from ourselves because we don't want to be with ourselves. Our pain is a kind of energy that is not pleasant. We fear that if we release our diversions and come back to ourselves, we'll be overwhelmed by the suffering, despair, anger, and loneliness inside. So we continue to run away. But if we don't have time and the willingness to take care of ourselves, how can we offer any genuine care to the people we love? That's why the first practice is to stop running, come home to our bodies, and recognize our suffering. When we notice anger or anxiety coming up, we can recognize these feelings of suffering. Suffering is one energy. Mindfulness is another energy that we can call on to come and embrace the suffering. The practice of mindful breathing is essential because it provides us with the energy we need for the other steps of taking care of suffering. With mindful breathing, you can recognize the presence of painful feelings, just like an older sibling meets a younger sibling. You can say, "Hello, my suffering. I know that you're there." In this way, the energy of mindfulness keeps us from being overwhelmed by painful feelings. We can even smile to our suffering and say, "Good morning, my pain, my sorrow, my fear. I see you. I'm here. Don't worry." And sometimes diversions are good. Sometimes I say, I need a diversion for 5 minutes. I need to take a break from even being mindful. And it helps me. And the more I relax into this process, the easier it gets. Like to remember, if I'm suffering, then just become aware that I'm suffering. Breathe in, breathe out, connect my head, connect my body. And it's just suffering. It's the mud that the lotus grows out of. The next chapter or part is called Embracing Suffering. If we let the suffering come up and just take over our mind, we can be quickly overwhelmed by it. So we have to invite another energy to come up at the same time, the energy of mindfulness. The function of mindfulness is, first, to recognize the suffering and then to take care of the suffering. The work of mindfulness is first to recognize the suffering and second to embrace it. A mother taking care of a crying baby naturally will take the child into her arms without suppressing, judging, or ignoring their crying. Mindfulness is like that mother, recognizing and embracing suffering without judgment. So the practice is not to fight or suppress the feeling, but rather to cradle it with a lot of tenderness. When a mother embraces her child, that energy of tenderness begins to penetrate into the body of the child. Even if the mother doesn't understand first why the child is suffering, and she needs some time to find out what the difficulty is, just her act of taking the child into her arms with tenderness can already bring relief to the child and to the mother. If we can recognize and cradle a suffering while we breathe mindfully, there is relief already. Embracing our suffering may seem to be the opposite of what we want to do, especially if our suffering is very large, as with depression. Depression is one of the most widespread forms of suffering in our time. It can take away our peace, our joy, our stability, and even our ability to eat, move around, or do simple tasks. It can seem insurmountable, and we may think that the only thing we can do is either to run away from it or give into it. But non-judgmentally recognizing and embracing this great suffering is not at all the same thing as giving into it. Once you have suffered, your acknowledgement and care of this suffering, it naturally will become less impenetrable and more workable. And then you have the chance to look at it deeply, with kindness, but still always with a solid ground of mindful breathing to support you and find out why the suffering has come to you. It's trying to get your attention, to tell you something. And now you can take the opportunity to listen. You can talk to someone to look with you, a teacher, a friend, a psychotherapist. Whether alone or together with your friends, you can explore what the roots it has, what kind of roots it has, what nutriments and habits of consumption have you been feeding your sorrow. You can discover how, through looking deeply, you can transform this organic garbage into compost, which in turn may become many beautiful flowers of understanding, compassion, and joy. I want to read that again. But non-judgmentally recognizing and embracing this great suffering is not at all the same as giving into it. Once you've offered your acknowledgement and care to this suffering, it naturally will become less impenetrable and more workable. And then you have the chance to look into it deeply with kindness, but still always with a solid ground of mindful breathing to support you. And you can find out why this suffering has come to you. It is trying to get your attention, to tell you something. And now you can take the opportunity to listen. You can ask someone to look with you, a teacher, a friend, a psychotherapist. But whether alone or together with your friends, you can explore what kind of roots it has, what nutrients and habits of consumption have been feeding your sorrow. You can discover how, through looking deeply, you can transform this organic garbage into compost, which in turn may become many beautiful flowers of understanding, compassion, and joy. And the final section in this chapter is called The Bell. Even with the best intention, and even with a long-standing mindfulness practice, we all have the tendency to run into the future or go back into the past to search for happiness elsewhere. A bell of mindfulness, whether it's an actual bell or some other sound, is a wonderful reminder to come back to ourselves, to come back to life here in the present moment. This morning, I spent a lot of time just listening to whatever sounds were there. And I was happy that I wasn't even thinking what the sound was. I was just listening to the sound. Thich Nhat Hanh says, the sound of the bell is the voice of Buddha within. Every one of us has Buddha nature, the capacity for compassionate, clear understanding nature within. So when we hear the sound of the bell, if we like practicing mindfulness, we can respond to that intervention with respect and appreciation. In my tradition, every time we hear the bell, we pause. We stop moving, talking, and thinking, and we listen to the voice of the heart. We don't say that we hit the bell or strike the bell. Rather, we say, invite the bell. Invite the bell to sound, because the bell is a friend, an enlightened friend that helps us wake up and guides us to ourselves, home to ourselves. Gentleness and nonviolence are characteristics of the sound of the bell. Its sound is gentle but very powerful. And I like to invite my bells to ring, and then I listen for as long as I can hear the tiniest little thread of sound before I can't hear it anymore. When you hear the sound of the bell, take the opportunity to come home to yourself and enjoy your breathing. Take a few moments to inhale and exhale deeply and touch a little happiness. If you want to experience what the end of suffering will feel like, it is in the here and now with this breath. If you want nirvana, it's right here. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, smile. And when I breathe, I try to breathe in different ways. This isn't Thich Nhat Hanh, this is me, Grandpa Ricky. I try to breathe in as many ways as I can. Sometimes I breathe in the front, or the back, or the sides, or up, or down, or with my belly, or with my chest, or with both of them. And as my teacher, Moshe Feldenkrais, used to say, if you only know how to do things one way, you're a slave, because you might not be able to do it that way sometime. An elephant comes and sits on your chest. Well, you can't breathe up, but you might be able to breathe out sideways. It's that kind of thinking. So I hope you're enjoying this No Mud, No Lotus. I'm certainly enjoying reading it out loud. And now I'm going to go and read that same stuff to my sweetie. It's our little morning ritual that staying at home and being in seclusion is allowing us lots of time to do these things that we enjoy doing. So I hope you have enjoyments today. And I hope you tell other people and let other people know about what helps you, what gives you some joy, some relief from your suffering. We need your stories.